We marched and are gathering today to demonstrate our commitment to education over incarceration. In 2020, the Vermont State Legislature proposed building a new women's prison in Vermont. The prison would house 158 women at the cost of $70 million, at least. Free Her believes not only is this a poor investment, it's an unnecessary and dangerous investment. Between 1985 and 2017, Vermont Corrections General Fund spending increased 335%, while our incarceration rate decreased 18% from 2008 to 2016. We have one of the lowest rates of incarceration in the entire country. Currently, there are only 55 people sentenced in the Chittenden Regional Correctional Facility, the Vermont Women's Prison in South Burlington. By comparison, there has been a state-level moratorium on funding of school construction for 16 years. Before this pause in state support, Vermont used to pay up to 30% of school construction costs. Between 1985 and 2017, when the Vermont Corrections Fund increased by 335%, the general funding on education increased just 57%. Vermont State University announced last week that it will eliminate 10 degree programs affecting music, performance, arts and technology, and photography, among others, in an effort to trim spending. I should say also in elementary schools and public schools, high schools, the first programs to go are always the arts programs. When we spend money on incarceration, we're actively divesting from schools and other supports that are crucial to keep marginalized students out of our criminal justice system. Today we're here asking, why build a larger prison with space for 158 people? We're asking, what would our education system look like if we divested from punishment and incarceration and invested in schools and education programs that address the trauma of having incarcerated family members? So I'd like to introduce you to our panelists who will address these issues, and I realized I didn't introduce myself, so I'll go first. I'm Deborah Stolaroff, she, her pronouns. I am recently retired from public education, which is my love and my passion. I was the personalized learning director for over 24 years at Twinfield Union School. And I live in Plainfield. So, you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Lydia Diamond. I don't use pronouns. 2-0, just up. And by 2-0, I'm only 60. Okay? And at my age, I just don't feel like I need a pronoun. Love you if you do. Okay? But I'm here today because I'm totally against the new prison. There's so much suffering going on as is. We need so many other things. But I'm also Brooklyn Strong. I'm also Black Girl Matters Vermont. And I speak for the poor because way too many people, no matter what color, gender, any of that, if you're a poor person, you will be penalized. And going to jail is one of the ways poor folks are penalized. So, I'm glad to be here. I'm thankful to be here. And y'all look good. Give yourself a round of applause.
Hello, my name is Amelia, and I am a current junior at the University of Vermont. I did an internship with Free Her Vermont this summer, and I also just stepped down from running a club at UVM where we volunteer in the women's prison. I have been aware of a lot of issues around the school to prison pipeline since I was 15 and I was going to Brattleboro High School in southern Vermont, where there was a restorative justice program to start to combat that. And so I come here today to talk about all of the things that we can do as alternatives to building another prison. I'm really excited to be here, so thank you all for coming.
Hi folks, my name is Infinite Colcleasure. I use he, him pronouns. And I'm here because Lydia told me to show up. I moved to Vermont in '91, and a few months later, I was incarcerated for conspiracy to distribute cocaine. So I was in and out of federal prison until my mid-20s, and then graduated from UVM. Worked the Spectrum for a little while, went and got a master's degree. And I'm here because I know that if it wasn't for, the education piece, I'd still be in the street. I'd be in and out of prison, right? And right now I'm working as a full-time paraeducator in elementary school in the Old North End. So seeing close up what our education system is like and, direction we need to go in.
So I'm gonna ask questions, and whoever wants to answer, just call for the mic. The first question, which actually a student of mine wrote, and I'm gonna have her answer it first, and then we can open it up to others, is how has your life been impacted by incarceration? Okay. My name is Haley Barnhart, and my life has been impacted by incarceration. There's two big stories to tell you today. The first is my biological father's story. My biological father was incarcerated when I was about 2.5 years old for the attempted murder of my mother. His story is a little bit more cut and dry. He needed to be there for his own safety and for the safety of myself and my mother. The first time I noticed that everyone else wasn't living in this kind of life was when I started school. In kindergarten, people would talk about their families, and very quickly I knew that I was not one of them. For most of my early years in school, I coped through elaborate lies. The most notable lies centered around him, either being dead or that he was a popular rap artist, and he was the popular rap artist Eminem. I didn't correspond with him at all until I was a little bit older. In second grade, he started writing me letters. I actually just found those the other day. They were honestly extremely inappropriate. I read through the things he was saying. Now that I'm 20, I was appalled that he would only call me a good daughter if I wrote him back promptly. Let me scroll down to the end. Incarceration has affected my life in many ways. With my dad's extensive record and appearance, we lived on very little income. Working under the table means that you also can't use your money to buy anything on the books. So not only were we poor, but with the money we did have, we couldn't buy any property, cars, or anything substantial. We lived in fear constantly that someone would come snatch him up for his warrants. That's where she ended. So, anybody else want to answer that question?
Well, when I came here, I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. Born and raised. I'm never giving that up. Nope. But I came to Vermont in '94. And I came through my mom, may she rest in peace. And I have a large family here. Now, I came in '94, I went to jail in '95, '96. I got out in January of '97, and I haven't looked back. I promised myself not to be stupid enough to get caught up again and end up back in prison, because that was a rude awakening for me. Coming from Brooklyn, with all that I had already been through, to come here and get locked up. Whew. Anyway, I survived. Still here. But going to prison hurt my mom, my children. I have 4 adult children, and I have 6 grandchildren. Oh, 7. I just had one a week ago. 7th grandbaby. And I fight for them. I have 3 beautiful granddaughters. And for the state to want to build a new prison, it's ridiculous. I could think of a lot of things my grandchildren could use other than a new damn prison. So incarceration is just not the way, you know? I didn't expect to go to prison when I got here, you know? And it shook me. But it shook me in a good way, because I never went back, I'm not going back. But it hurts all of those around you as well. And so that's part of why I'm here too. My sister was here, her daughter showed up. My sister has, she's gonna be mad, but she got 17 grandbabies. So we're a big family. But living in Vermont, there are certain things that happen, no matter who you are. And it's been a struggle, but we still try to stay strong, stay safe, stay on that straight and narrow line so that we can live better lives. And I'm happy we back outside from the pandemic.
Yeah, so.
Thanks, Lydia.
Yeah, thank you, Lydia. Like I was saying, I saw education as my way out because, you know, you get the felony on your record, you get 2 felonies on your record. There's not a whole lot out there for you. So, but the trade-off was I had to borrow money to go to school. So now that I'm employable with the education, I have 6 figures worth of debt, right? So I see that as being related, right? I see, you know, the impact of my incarceration and me feeling like I need to borrow money to go to school so that I can be employable, right? It's a thing. And still to this day, right? I will say 5 years ago, once upon a time, I ran for public office, and it came up, right? It came up even though it had happened 20 years ago. It came up during my run that I had been arrested and charged with felonies before. So that stays with you, right? No matter what you do and how much you overcome, people will still come back at you like, hey, remember this thing you did a long time ago when you were young? Well, why did, as if it really had anything to do with where I'm at 20 years ago, right? There's that. And I'll just say one more thing. My partner worked at 4 C's in 2017, and that was a lot. She worked there as a social worker, and that was her last full-time job. That job crushed her. She came home and it just ate up our relationship because she's like so empathic with all the people around her. She would bring that stuff home. So it's not just the prisoners, the people who work inside that building are suffering too, because there's, you've heard the stories, right? Correction officers don't do well. So it's not really not working for anybody.
Thank you. So our next question is, how does the school to prison pipeline function, and what steps can be taken to combat it?
I can start with this question. I think that there's a lot of ways that we can see the way that our school systems today recreate the same punitive systems that we're seeing in our prisons. And the solution being to send students out of school, to suspend students, to give students detention so that they can no longer participate in their education, is the same thing that we're doing when people are suffering, and then we send them to prison so that they can no longer be a part of their community. And I think that this system that we have set up, as both of these wonderful people were just talking about, it fails the people that it supposedly says it's trying to help. And so the way that we see that play out at a school level, I think in a lot of ways is where we need to begin. Because no matter how many times people have said this, I'm gonna say it again, is the youth, the young people today are the people who are going to be growing up and living in this world in 10 and 20 years. And they're gonna be the ones who are either, again, being afflicted with the same system that we're seeing today that are destroying people's lives, or they're going to be the ones that can see a hope for a different world that we can create. if we are not sending people away, isolating people from their communities, from the people that they love, when other things around have failed them. And I think the last thing that I want to say about it is that it's not about reacting to the problems that we have, and that's what our system does right now. It's about understanding why these problems are happening in the first place. I truly believe that the people who are incarcerated in Vermont, the people who are incarcerated around the world, there is a reason that people are being convicted and incarcerated, and these reasons go much, much deeper than what we are addressing. People are experiencing houselessness and intense poverty, and if we're not able to address those first and start there, then I don't think that that's gonna be the way to fix the system. So I'm gonna pass it to you both as well.
Thanks, Amelia.
I just want to say that there's a little, the word is keep. And it stands for keep educating yourself. And I've held on to that for a very long time. And I would recommend you hold on to it. Keep educating yourself and you won't have to worry about prison. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Bill.
Can you repeat the question?
So it's, how does the school to prison pipeline function, and what steps can be taken to combat it?
And I think it's funny to call it a pipeline, right? Because kids will say to me that they're in prison, that school is prison. Like, this feels like jail, right? Already. So, to think that, it's jail is waiting for them after 12th grade, I think is kind of a misnomer. It's already happening. I think that what we forget that is that we have a compulsory education system. They have to go. If we don't send our children there, we get truants. We go to court, right? So unless you can homeschool, which, even as an educated person, I don't have the chops to be my kid's father and his teacher at the same time, right? Unless you have like all these resources for tutors and stuff like that, you have to find a way to get your kid to school. So it's a hard dynamic, and to think about it as a pipeline that starts from, pre-K to, then move to prison. I think it's actually happening every day as we send our children to school, because we've all inherited this public education system that is not only is it compulsory, but it's set up where there's usually one teacher doing a lesson for maybe, let's say, about 20 children. Maybe there's a paraeducator in the room, maybe there's other support staff around, and the needs vary, from, say in one 3rd grade class, you have children who are reading at kindergarten grade level, and you have children who are reading at 5th grade level. So you have all these variations of different abilities for young people, and for one individual to be responsible for all of those children, and then also to be engaging with their parents on a regular basis, that's a setup, right? It's a setup. So, if we're gonna say education, not incarceration, we need to really be clear about what education is and what that looks like. It's hard to just throw that out there and expect that, what we have now is not what we have right now. Right? We have to, I think, be a little bit more specific about what we're talking about when we say education.
Here, here. We could talk, I think, for hours about how our schools could possibly change to keep kids engaged. And I think I want to also add, in terms of the school to prison pipeline, the role of capitalism, and that we're looking at a corporate structure of prisons, and that corporate structure needs to be fed, and the constant feeding, where's that gonna come from, right? So they find people and they keep them in prison, and that continues on and on, right? So there's that basic structure that continues the school to prison pipeline because it's a business, right? Okay, the next question. Have you witnessed racism, transphobia, and other forms of discrimination playing a role in the incarceration of individuals?
No, because I forget that I was locked up. I don't wake up like, oh, I got a criminal record. Like, I forget. But then there's always something that reminds you. It's like, oh, right, okay, I forget. I'll run into somebody coming out of the federal building who's just getting out of the system and like, yo, what's up? Hi, how's it going? But here's how a lot of it goes in the old North End, right? There are people who have been, selling drugs, doing drugs for years and generations, and never saw the inside of a prison, right? You could go around, you know where the trap houses are. Depending on how you look, right, you can last maybe about 2 weeks up in Burlington doing that, right? So there is, the enforcement of who gets in trouble, who gets targeted, who gets investigated, you know what I mean? And we don't, let's not even talk about the drug enforcement agents, the DEA, the ATF, who are they targeting, who are they watching, where are they going, that's the thing. And if you want to see for yourself, all you have to do is go down to the Costello jail and look outside on the courtroom and look at the list of names, and you will see the names and you can guess where people are from. And it's not all drugs. Some of it is domestic violence, you know what I mean? Some of it is for stuff that people do need to be pulled off the street for. But the point I'm trying to make is, in terms of enforcement, the people who are getting locked up are poor people, for sure, I'm not connected to the trans community, you know what I mean? I'm sure there's a lot going on there too. But when you look at the names of the folks who are showing up in the court system, it looks like there's a lot of people, there's not that many people of color in Burlington, but there's a lot of people of color going to court in Burlington.
Thanks.
I think to look at and answer this question, we need to look at the history of what our system of incarceration was meant to do in the first place. And I'm lucky enough to be able to study this and look deeply into it at UVM. And every time I learn something new about it, it becomes all that more clear what this system was meant to do. And the original intention of this system was to incarcerate Black people. And it was a way of, and there's a lot of literature about it as the new Jim Crow and what is being done now. I think we cannot detach that from the history of this country and what has been done for hundreds and hundreds of years. And so to answer this question and look at the people who are being incarcerated right now, we have to look at why this system was created. And it was created to incarcerate Black and brown people, and it was created to incarcerate poor people. So yes, the transphobia, the transphobia, racism, all of that is ever present and perpetuated by the carceral state itself.
Okay. So to answer this question, I'm going to tell you a little story about how I went to Hannaford's to get something to eat. I tried to do self-checkout, but the machine was broken. So I paid for my food from the what's the first lane, 15 items or less. Anywho, as I'm leaving Hannaford's in South Burlington, this poor little white child come running behind me. Miss, you gotta pay for that. And I had to catch myself from chopping his head off. I smacked him with my receipt. Now, I don't mean that literally. But I was like, "Hiya! There go my receipt." You know, like really? A child. He might have been 18, 19. That's a child to me. But who taught you to run behind a black woman and accuse her of stealing food? It really hurt. And I could have reacted differently. But I didn't. I did not chop his head off. I smacked him with the receipt. It didn't touch him. I didn't touch him. I don't mean it literally like I hit him. But I did let him know that I paid for my food. And so I'm making a habit of making sure I get my receipt anywhere. I go Walmart, Target, because people are taught to react in a certain manner when they see me. And I don't like it. Sometimes I can handle it, sometimes I can't. And talk about Jim Crow, I met his grandson, Jack. That boy is out of control. He's a grown man with a family. But he violated my civil rights based on race, gender, and disability in 2019. I'm gonna end it there.
Thanks.
We got a hand up all the way in the back. That's Uncle Roy.
Uncle Roy, would you like to say something?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Roy B. Hill, 80 years old. Been in Vermont going on 40 years. She just shared an incident. Let me share one also. See how I'm dressed? This is how I dress on my Sundays. It is after church. After church, I stopped by this new place up here, relatively new, across the street from Shaw's. You know the store I'm talking about, right? So I went in to get my wife something that she enjoys, and they didn't have it. So I start to go out, leave the store. This rent-a-cop stops me at the door. "What did you take?" I ignored him because I'm saying, this can't be real. So I go to stop again, and at that point, one of the people who worked for the store came in. Oh, at that time they had a kind of security on the things you put your groceries in. Okay, and so it had stopped me initially. Then the rent-a-cop came over and accused me for stealing. Nothing in the cart, but he accused me of stealing. She came over and released the whatever security was on the cart that you put your groceries in. I ignored him again. I called the store manager. She wasn't there. She was there the next day. She called me. She said, "We fired him. First of all, it's not their responsibility to stop you. There's another procedure that they go through. And secondly, we really, apologize, so on and so forth." The point I'm trying to make is, this thing is so deep. It is so deep. I walked in the store. I've been going in and out of stores on that. Used to live around the block when we first moved here for years. He saw a black person, whether it was a black African-American female or black person, and I don't know what they do to Native Americans. But I'm saying that what we're talking about here right now is serious. It is very serious. This is not a play toy, because what we're seeing is an escalation of the rage that initially was attributed to road rage. Now we see it in a grocery store. We see it in the classroom. I live in Franklin County, and little children there, and I go to the school board meeting on a regular basis. And some of the parents who come with the kind of bile that is so provocative, So you understand then why their children come. And they start at age 3 or 3rd grade, whichever. And they're very smart because they know the law. They know that you can't touch them, and they know that certain teachers cannot touch them, or they will sue you. So we have a tremendous job. We, who are members of the same human family, this color game that politicians and others are playing is destroying you, destroying me, destroying the country that we live in. This is an important place to be right now because we're all being educated on so many different levels. So let's make a difference. I'm sorry to interrupt, but she hit a point here that speaks loudly, and it speaks 24/7 to all 660 residents in the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Uncle Robert. So, any other thoughts about that, answering to that question at all?
Thank you, Uncle Roy.
So the new women's prison is expected to cost $100 million. And if we had $100 million to support schools and youth, what possibilities could open up?
I'd like to see more art in school because the children thrive on it. I'd like to see more reading out loud in school because the children thrive on it. And they love each other. I would like adult teachers not to punish them in ways that traumatizes them. And I have a 7-year-old granddaughter in the Colchester School District, which is a first for my family. And she was traumatized, so that's why I speak to that. But children, they love soaking up education. They might not show it the way you want to see it, but you see it in ways that say, oh, it's working. Good job. Yay! I'm a grandma of 7. I got 4 adult children. I call them Peters, P-I-T-A, but the education system could use all of that money, every penny, to be better for our children, for our community, to be better prepared for the future of this world. Don't nobody want no new prison. Oh, I'm gonna pass the mic.
Thanks.
$100 million could go a long way, and I think the first thing is paying all of the staff members and teachers a livable wage, and social workers, and all of the people who are helping the children learn to thrive, and especially in a setting that in a lot of ways is recreating the punitive environments that don't allow children to thrive. And so in addition to paying and giving everybody the opportunity and resources they need to make this system less punitive where children are growing up, we can also teach children to resolve conflict between themselves and among themselves with restorative approaches as opposed to punitive approaches. And that in itself could use funding. There are already so many institutions and places around the states who are doing the work for people who are coming back into the community after incarceration. And all of these places and people who are doing that work are underpaid and underappreciated. So just diverting some of that $100 million towards programs mean that most of the women who we are trying to build another prison for will have the resources they need not to have been incarcerated in the first place.
Yay, thank you.
You brought up capitalism earlier, right? And I think what's happening right now with this, the proposal around a new prison is, you know, if you build it, we'll fill it, right? watched that happen in New York State. We watched that around the country. Watched the prison population grow as jobs disappear, right? It's a surplus labor thing, right? And I mean, in Burlington, they're building a new high school, right? So there's a big business, it's $100 million business in the little old city of Burlington, right? And so, it's hard to think about alternatives because I haven't seen, the closest thing I've seen to something that could be scaled up is the family room, right? I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Janet S. Munt family room in Burlington, but that model of, working with whole families and their children, it's the closest thing I've seen to, something that works, right? I mean, we don't have, in the whole state of Vermont, we have nowhere for folks to go and detox, right? At all. And there's still billions of dollars in COVID money floating around, right? Our state has been in a surplus, in a black, for the past couple of years because of all the COVID money. And so all this money is gonna come and go, and we'll have nothing to show for it. And it's in part because it's all about the market. It's all about the market. And if you had the most recent 7 days where they're talking about blighted properties, vacant properties around the city, they tell you in black and white that development is smart for that. They just wait. We're gonna wait it out. We're gonna wait for the market, for the best time for the market to move forward. And so it's the same thing. It's solving. No story that we're reading about or seeing on the news is not related to this women's prison. It's all related to this women's prison and the mindset of not just our governor, but our with all due respect to our public officials, the state legislature, the Senate, our city council, there's this mindset around the market and what the market says and what the market doesn't say, and we're held hostage to it, right? We have an air base here that we're held hostage to because of the economy that's connected to it. So, yeah, the only thing I've seen in this state, in this country, the closest thing I've seen to like this is an amazing model. There's a lot of trust here, and this is a place where children want to be, and where families want to bring their children, is the family room. I don't know how you scale that up.
With $100 million.
That's a good start.
Yeah. Did you want to say something else about that?
I guess the only other thing I'd say is everybody was housed during COVID in Vermont, and people have been unhoused since. And I think it's important to think about that because we're capable of doing that, and we did it. And so just to keep that in mind, especially as we're having these conversations around building this new prison, is there's ways, and it has already been done, and there are people actively making choices not to continue to do that. So what can we do instead?
Lydia, do you want to say something?
I want the people in positions of power that make these decisions, I want them to spend the night in a prison so they could know what they making a decision on for others. Sick of this shit.
Put them in prison for a month.
I was saying a day, but a month sounds fantastic. But it's ridiculous to keep doing the same thing over and over again. Now we here against the prison, but they're gonna build it anyway. They're gonna spend that money anyway. But it's still disgusting to have people making these decisions purely because of money. purely because of what money brings to the table, no, I'm sick of that. I want something better. Tired of seeing people penalized and punished all the time. Like I said, for being poor, for being black, for being female, sick of it. And Jack Crow that lives in Colchester, his day is coming. I plan to make sure of it.
Thank you. So, yeah, you keep that one. So you guys have sort of alluded to this question, so I'm just gonna ask it and see if we can dig a little deeper. What are alternatives to building a new women's prison in Vermont?
I'm running for office. I'm running for South Burlington City Council. And not because I want the job, but because I want those that look like me to know there's nothing to fear. Step up and help your community. Because people who look like me need to see people who look like me. You know what I'm saying? And when I found out that no person of color had ever stepped up to even try in my town, South Burlington, I was shocked. I mean, it's 2023, not 1923. So I want, that's my way. That's how I'm taking a stand for change. Because I am sick of that. Okay, I ain't gonna say that. I'm gonna pass it.
Okay. Alternatives to building a new women's prison. Thank you, Lydia. I'm so glad you've been stepping up to office.
I think we've all alluded to this already a little bit, but something that I go back to a lot, especially learning about the criminal justice system we have right now, is a lot of it is really hard to hear, and the more that you learn about it, the more alarming it is my experience. And so I think it's important to recognize that because we're operating based on what we see right now. And so the things that we can hope for and see in the future aren't things that we're looking around and able to see. And it's challenging. It's challenging to create something that we don't see existing around us. But I think that that challenge is also really exciting. And I think that there are things and there are places that this has begun to work. And some of this is a personal project of mine too, so I'm a little biased, but one of those ways to me is creating more restorative ways to address punishment and not just addressing things once they've already occurred, but giving people the support they need so that the thing and the harm that occurs doesn't happen in the first place. And so in the state of Vermont, there's community justice centers, and they're doing a lot of wonderful work. And there's also places where people are able to go and find housing after they've had experience incarcerated, like Dismiss House and other organizations around the state. And again, all of these things that are already in place and beginning to happen, instead of prisons, instead of punitive environments, need the support and need the resources. And that $100 million that would go to an environment which, although the state is saying will be a rehabilitative environment, I strongly believe that a prison where people are inherently locked up and unable to leave is not restorative or rehabilitative, and it will not be.
Great, thank you.
So I brought up the family, bro, right? And I'm gonna keep holding that up because it works and it's happening, right? It's concrete. But I also brought up that we don't have any place for folks to detox. And you'll find that a lot of folks who are in and out, are struggling with substance, abuse. And so I don't know if anyone's heard of NADA and ADA, but they do acupuncture, and they do it in communities that have been like fraught with trauma, like Hurricane Katrina as an example. And they train, people to treat each other, right? And acupuncture. And so communities are empowered to care for each other as opposed to, having treatment centers and have to go to a center, you know, you can, through spread trainings through a community where people are actually, you know, learning to work with each other, you know, and I'm telling you, and I'm in the Old North End, I'm in the heart of it, and I'm seeing people, you know, just like, just dropping, like just falling over in front of me, you know, every day, you know, in my garage, you know, in the car, you know, some days, in my car, you know, and so it would be more empowering for me to know how to work with individuals who, because the police are not coming, right? We know that, right? If you need the police, you're in trouble, right? So we need to figure out how to take care of each other and how to respond, you know, without having to need a police, because they're not coming. You know, they're coming after the fact, right? So if there are ways that we can, you know, empower communities to try and, you know, address some of the acute stuff that's happening, you know, in front of us. And then I'll say one more thing. I think, just using that $100 million number again, piloting what other folks are doing, and this will not be new. Guaranteed income. Guaranteed income. You know, you follow the zip codes. You know who's where and what they need, and just see what happens when you cut people a check. You know what I mean? Because, you know, they need it, and see, let's just see what happens if you cut people a check, you know, for 2 years, you know, what will happen, you know, in those households, right? I mean, what do we have to lose, right, at this point with all the COVID money?
Thank you so much. So Alyssa just gave me the 3-minute warning. We've run out of time. And thank you so much for your powerful answers. I think you guys really